My parents want to have a special reunion at my wedding with their golden daughter after she disappeared, but they can do whatever they want when I have my wedding somewhere else. For a long time, 29-year-old me thought my parents were genuinely excited about my wedding. After all, I was their only child now, or at least the only one who still spoke to them. My older sister, 32, had disappeared from our lives years ago, cutting off all contact after cheating on them in a way they never fully explained to me. They never wanted to talk about it, and I'd learned to stop asking. So when they threw themselves completely into planning my wedding, I interpreted it as an attempt to make up for lost time. My fiancé, Brendan, 32, and I had planned a small, intimate wedding, but my parents were determined to be involved in every detail. They insisted on managing the guest list, seating chart, and even some elements of the ceremony. At first, I was moved. They said they just wanted to feel included, and I saw no problem with letting them help. But as the months went by, I started noticing strange things. For example, my opinions were ignored more often than I'd like. I'd mention a song I wanted to sing as I walked down the aisle, only for my mom to say she already had something special in mind. She talked about keeping the ceremony small, but my dad kept implying that weddings should be family gatherings. Then, there was the secrecy. They started taking whispered calls whenever I walked into the room. I heard snatches of conversations about people I didn't remember inviting, and when I asked, they'd respond with things like, "Don't worry, honey, we just added a few close family members, it's nothing." The final straw came when I accidentally overheard a conversation between them. I had entered their house unannounced one night because I needed to drop off some papers they'd forgotten at my house. They didn't hear me enter, and before I could call them, I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen. She was talking to my father, and her tone was pure excitement. He said he couldn't wait to see my reaction when my sister made her surprise entrance at the wedding, that it would be the moment of the night, something people would talk about for years. My dad laughed, saying he'd already spoken to some family members about it, and they all thought it was a fantastic idea. It was the perfect way to bring the family together, and even if I was shocked at first, I'd probably get over it. After all, what bride wouldn't want their estranged sister back in their life? All this time, they hadn't been planning my wedding to celebrate me. They'd been planning it as a staged, carefully orchestrated event to force a reconciliation I'd never asked for. I walked away before they could notice me and drove home. I'd spent months thinking their involvement was out of love, only to realize they were more interested in using me as a pawn in their family reunion fantasy. By the time I got home, Brendan knew immediately something was wrong. I told him everything. When I finished, he didn't hesitate. He said this was our wedding, and if my parents couldn't respect it, then we needed to take control before it was too late. I spent the whole night thinking about this, which made me angry and I couldn't sleep. So it was a vicious cycle of frustration and anger at my parents. By morning, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to let this happen. I called my parents and told them I was going to their house to talk. My mother didn't suspect anything, probably thinking I was going to discuss last-minute wedding plans. My father said he was happy because they also had some things they wanted to discuss with me. It made me laugh that they still thought they were in control. I arrived at their house and didn't bother with formalities. I told them I knew everything. At first, they pretended not to understand, making them look confused, but I told them to leave the nonsense aside because I'd already heard them last night. They kept saying they didn't know what I was talking about, so I repeated word for word what I had heard, both the idea of the meeting and that it didn't matter what I thought, because I would surely get over it. The expression on my mother's face changed from feigned confusion to ill-disguised guilt. Finally, my mother spoke first. He said he didn't understand why I was so upset. He didn't see how important this was to our family. He said this wedding was the perfect opportunity to win my sister back. He said he dreamed of this moment for years, and that, of course, they were excited for my wedding, but that this was bigger than just me. My father said that sometimes in life, you have to make sacrifices for the greater good. He told me I was being selfish, that I was willing to throw away the chance to repair our family just because I wanted things my way. It wasn't that I didn't love my sister. It bothered me that my parents were using my wedding, when they could have done all this at another time, to reconcile with her. And they were doing it all behind my back, when it was about my wedding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked them if they'd ever considered how I felt. My wedding wasn't a get-together. It wasn't an ordinary day. It was about Brendan and me. That night, Brendan and I decided we were going to plan the wedding we wanted without them. We started looking for a completely different venue, eliminating the guests my parents had insisted on inviting. If they wanted to get together so badly, they could have it at their own wedding. The only thing is that there won't be any boyfriends, but they'll take care of that. They'll probably get over it when they find out. At least the only good thing about all this is that I've got my wedding back and seen my parents' true colors. I don't think it was that bad, because in the end we're back to the wedding my fiancé and I had planned. Update 1. It's been 15 days since I posted. The silence didn't last long. My parents found out we were having another wedding, and they weren't going to simply accept being cut from it without a fight, but I underestimated how relentless they would be. The next morning, my mom started calling me nonstop. When I didn't answer, she switched to texts that read like paragraphs about how she understood I was emotional at the moment, but that I needed to calm down and think about what I was doing, because to her, none of this was okay. My dad thought this was some kind of punishment just because they were good parents and had tried to do something nice for me. He said it was their fault because they had spoiled me, and now I was behaving like an entitled person. It was their fault because they'd been too nice to me. I won't tell you what I told him, because I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on what really mattered, fixing the mess they created. Brendan and I sat down that morning with a brand new notebook, crossing off every single plan my parents had been involved in. The venue was eliminated. The guest list was redone from scratch. The catering service, we chose something we actually liked instead of the expensive, fancy menu, which probably tasted like wet underwear that my mom had insisted on ordering. It was a lot of work, but now it feels more like our wedding. But the moment my parents realized I was serious, they ramped up their attack. First, they called our extended family. I started receiving messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins. Some were genuinely confused that the wedding was being changed. Others were downright furious, especially since they were on my mom's guest list. She told everyone that she simply wanted to celebrate my wedding in the most meaningful way possible, and that I was being unreasonable, and was thinking of changing the wedding to something more intimate because it was fashionable. Some family members tried to reason with me, telling me that a wedding is a one-time thing and couldn't be small. They also supported my parents because they were the poor victims here. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I let them do the talking while I quietly moved forward with my new wedding plans, eliminating anyone who sided with my parents. But then, my parents made their next move. I had already sent a cancellation notice to the original venue, because I didn't want to receive any additional charges. But when I called to confirm everything, the coordinator hesitated. She told me she'd spoken to my mother an hour earlier, who had assured her that plans were still on. I told the coordinator that my parents were no longer involved in my wedding, and that I should ignore any communication from them. The woman apologized and assured me she would process the cancellation immediately. I don't know why, but I found it odd that she saw it as normal. I guess this can't be the first wedding to have problems due to the bride and groom's parents. Still, I knew this wasn't over. And sure enough, not even an hour later, my mom called me furious, having learned the venue was canceled. This time I responded. He accused me of ruining his plans by canceling the venue, saying he'd already told everyone the wedding would be held there, and that the idea for their get-together was based on that location. I told him, it's my wedding, and I'm going to do what I want. If you want a fancy get-together with my sister, plan it another day. That's when she unleashed her trump card, or at least what she thought it was. She said that if I refused to reinstate the wedding as they'd planned it, then she and my dad wouldn't attend at all. I almost laughed because I'd been making wedding plans 2.0 and hadn't let them know they weren't invited. He said it like it was a threat, as if he thought I'd suddenly panic and beg them to come back. But if there was one thing that was certain, it was that the wedding was going to be better not only because of the planning, but because they wouldn't be there. I told him that was fine. He remained completely silent because he hadn't expected it. Then he started backtracking, saying he didn't mean it that way, that he was just trying to make me see reason. I told him I thought the idea was fantastic and thanked him for the suggestion. Then I hung up. Not only did they uninvite themselves, but now they think I did it just now, when in fact it was already planned. I was dying of laughter at that. Update 2. It's been weeks, but that's an eternity in family dramas. So here's the full story. With my parents out of the picture, Brendan and I threw ourselves into planning a better wedding. You already knew that. The changes were that we chose a stunning outdoor venue, completely different from the grand ballroom my mom had chosen. The guest list is full of people who truly love and support us, not just distant relatives we're forced to invite for show. They're people who haven't made us feel bad, like my parents or their flying monkeys. For example, our closest friends and Brendan's family, who supported me without hesitation. Planning the wedding became fun again. So 3 weeks before the wedding, my parents made one last attempt to patch things up. One night, I came home to find a handwritten letter on my doorstep. It had no stamp, which meant it had been hand-delivered. Inside, my mother had poured her heart, or whatever it is in her chest, stating that she never meant to hurt me. He wrote about how much he loved me, about how this whole situation had gotten out of control. He begged me to let go of the past and let them back into my life. He promised that if I did, they'd support whatever I wanted. No more surprise meetings, no more hidden agendas. It was a beautifully written letter, I must say, full of everything she knew I wanted to hear. But it meant nothing. But no apology could undo that. I threw the letter away without responding. By then, I'd made peace with the fact that they would never be a part of my wedding or my life in a meaningful way. They chose to be that way, not me. Update 3. Time for more wedding drama. An unknown number popped up on my phone a few evenings ago. It said, "Hi, can we talk? It's me." After all these years, after everything I'd been through, she wanted to talk now. She was my sister, and we hadn't spoken in years since she disappeared, leaving my parents in this state of utter stupidity. She'd cut off all contact with us without explanation. My parents spent years trying to track her down, making up excuses for her absence, because they didn't want people finding out the family's dirty laundry. And now, just weeks before my wedding, she magically reappeared. I was hesitant to respond. I have nothing against her, other than she's cut off contact with me, but the association with my parents is something that can cause an ulcer. But another message arrived. I heard what happened with Mom and Dad. I just want to explain. I'd spent so much time wondering why he disappeared. I told him to call me so we could talk. The call came in a matter of seconds. She said she'd been too afraid to contact me, that she missed me more than she could imagine. She said she'd heard about the wedding and all the drama with our parents, and that she hated that I'd had to go through it alone. I interrupted her and asked her why she'd really disappeared. I wanted the truth. She remained silent, then laughed nervously, and said it was complicated. I told her to simplify it. She hesitated again, then said something about how she felt trapped by our parents, who had too many expectations, and that she simply needed to get away to find herself. I told her she hadn't just walked away, she'd disappeared. She didn't even have the decency to say anything to me. She accused me of being too young to understand at the time. She said I'd always been the beloved daughter, the perfect one, the one who never did anything wrong in Mom and Dad's eyes, while she'd had to bear the brunt of their expectations. I asked her if she was serious and reminded her that our parents never saw me the same way they saw her. She had been their favorite, because everything was always about her, according to my parents. She mocked me and said I was delusional. That's when I lost my patience. I told her the only reason they were so involved in the wedding was because they saw it as an opportunity to bring her back. I asked her point blank if she knew about our parents' plan, if she'd been involved. She denied it immediately too quickly. I pressed her. She said she'd never do anything like that to me, that she tried to contact me now because she really wanted to fix things. I didn't believe her. I told her that if she really wanted to fix things, she should start by telling me the truth. Not just about why she left, but why she'd stayed away all this time. She said she had her reasons. I told her I no longer cared about her reasons, that she'd chosen to leave, chosen to stay away, and now she had to live with that choice. She tried to interrupt me, tried to say something else, but I wouldn't let her. I told her she couldn't disappear for years, and then show up in my life as if she suddenly cared, that she couldn't show up now, after all the damage had been done, expecting me to welcome her with open arms. Update 4. It all started with a casual comment from my fiancé, Brendan. He was scrolling through his phone when he mumbled that someone had been bombarding him with messages. I barely looked up from my computer, thinking it was something work-related, but then he said her name, my sister. I asked him how he'd gotten her number, and he sighed, rubbing his forehead. He said he had no doubt my parents had given it to him. Apparently, she'd left a series of messages, some apologetic, others casual, and a few where she tried to play the worried-to-be sister-in-law card. I asked him what he'd said, and he unlocked his phone and handed it to me without hesitation. The first text was simple. "Hi, I know we haven't met, but I really want to talk to you." Then another. "I just want to understand what's going on. I feel like there's a lot of miscommunication. And another thing, I don't want to cause any trouble. I just miss my family, and I hate that things have become so chaotic before the wedding." I kept scrolling. He'd been persistent. There were longer messages where he tried to paint himself as the misunderstood victim. He said he just wanted to fix things, that he hated how the family had splintered. Then, in one particularly irritating message, she had the audacity to say that I must have misunderstood her, and that she'd only left because she was in a difficult place mentally and needed time. I asked Brendan if he responded to any of those messages, and he shook his head. Then, as if reading my mind, he pulled out his phone and typed a single message, "Don't contact me again," and sent it. It should have ended there, but it didn't. A few days later, Brendan came home from work looking annoyed. I barely had time to ask him what was wrong before he threw his phone on the kitchen counter and said my sister had called him. She answered without looking. She explained that she tried to sound cheerful, acting as if nothing had happened, as if they were just two future relatives catching up. Brendan immediately interrupted her and told her he wasn't interested in the sad story she was about to make up. She started pleading, saying she wasn't trying to cause trouble, that she just wanted to talk to me, but that I wasn't giving her a chance. Brendan told her that if she really wanted to fix things, she would have done it years ago, not conveniently showing up when our parents needed her. She got defensive. She said it wasn't fair that I was excluding her, that it was cruel of me to treat her like a stranger when we used to be so close. She insisted that she deserved to be a part of my life. She told her that she was the one who had become an outsider, that she was the one who abandoned her family, not the other way around. Then he said something that made me want to kiss him right then and there. He told me he wasn't entitled to my forgiveness just because I'd suddenly decided I loved him. He didn't like that. He became enraged, saying he knew nothing about our family and had no right to get involved. He told her he had a right to get involved because she had chosen to involve him. He also told her that, as my fiancé, as the man who had seen up close how I dealt with the pain she had left behind, he had every right to keep her out of our lives on my behalf. She tried again, softening her voice, trying to sound pitiful. Brendan wasn't fooled. He told her frankly that her manipulation wasn't going to work on him, and then ended the call. The next morning, I received a text from my mom. She said she couldn't believe what Brendan had done, that my sister was devastated after their conversation. I didn't even bother to reply. Instead, I blocked his number. Brendan did the same with my sisters. And just like that, the door slammed shut. Update 5. I wasn't surprised when my mom tried to pull another stunt before the wedding. I found out about her attempt to involve Brendan's mother in her chaos when my mother-in-law called me a few weeks before the wedding. Luckily, I have a good mother-in-law, and she called me a little amused. She told me that my mother had called her, acting like they were old friends, and saying she just needed a mother's advice on how to mend this rift between us. At first, my mother-in-law had assumed she was calling to apologize or find a reasonable solution, but she quickly realized my mother had no interest in that. My mother had started by sighing dramatically, saying she simply didn't understand why I was so insistent on keeping my own parents away from the most important day of my life. She claimed that she and my father just wanted to do something special for me, and that it wasn't their fault I'd overreacted. She framed it as if they'd simply been overly excited about my wedding, and that I'd punished them by cutting them out completely. My mother-in-law let her talk for a while, before calmly asking her what exactly she'd planned for my wedding that had made me feel so strongly about keeping them out. My mother tried to dodge the question, saying it was all a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion. Then she switched tactics, playing the role of the heartbroken mother, saying she never imagined her own daughter would turn her back on her family over a minor disagreement. When my mother-in-law asked her what she meant by a minor disagreement, my mother began to get frustrated. She said that, as a mother, my mother-in-law should understand how painful it must be to have a daughter who refuses to listen to reason. She said a mother should always be able to reconcile with her children, because family is more important than pride. That's when my mother-in-law decided she'd heard enough. He very firmly told my mother that he did understand what it meant to be a mother, and that precisely because of that, he knew that respect between parents and children wasn't one-sided. He told her that he had always believed that relationships should be built on mutual understanding, not manipulation. And then he said something that left my mother completely baffled. He told her that he trusted my decisions. That's when my mother started to panic. She tried to twist the narrative again, saying that she should at least talk to me and try to fix things before it was too late. But my mother-in-law told her she wasn't going to play devil's advocate. She said that if I decided to distance myself from my parents, it was because I had very valid reasons for doing so, and that if my mother really wanted to be at my wedding, she should have started by apologizing instead of trying to manipulate her way back in. My mother was silent for a long moment before making one last attempt to guilt her. She asked my mother-in-law how she would feel if Brendan ever abandoned her the way I had abandoned them, and that's when my mother-in-law burst out laughing. She told him that Brendan didn't need to leave her because he'd never given her a reason to. He'd always respected his decisions, never tried to force him into something he didn't want to do, and certainly never lied to him or manipulated him just to get his way. So, if my mother was being neglected, maybe I should seriously consider why. Then my mother, as usual lately, got the hang-up call. And I can vouch for the things my mother-in-law said. She's always been like a second mother to me, and I've never attempted anything remotely similar. Update 6. I went ahead with my wedding. The ceremony was intimate, we kept the guest list small, and there were no changes to the invitation list, if you know what I mean. Brendan's family was wonderful. His mother, despite knowing all the drama that had unfolded, never mentioned it. She simply hugged me and told me I looked beautiful as she walked down the aisle. I didn't think about the people who weren't there. I didn't think about my mother or my father. I didn't think about my sister. Brendan, standing at the altar, waiting for me with a smile, made every ounce of stress I'd ever felt about this wedding become completely irrelevant. After the wedding, I received a single text from my mom. It was brief. She said she hoped I was happy and couldn't believe I'd let a wedding tear our family apart. I read it once, which was enough, and then I deleted it without responding because she was wrong. A wedding hadn't torn our family apart, she had. Update 7. Everyone has asked me to talk to my sister to find out why she left and to get some explanation, but I was against the idea because I knew my sister was part of my parents' plan, which I confirmed. However, I received an email a few days ago congratulating me on the wedding and also explaining her reasons for leaving. I hope this is the same as talking to her, because after reading her email, I think I have even less desire to do so. As I said, he started by congratulating me on my wedding and regretting not attending. A bit of manipulation and a bit of victimhood, as he mentioned that he would have liked to have been able to talk to me. He also admitted that he knew about our parents' plan and that he was fine with it because he wanted our reunion to be special. But here's what you probably care about: the reason she distanced herself from everyone, including me. She said our parents were always very demanding, which is strange because they haven't been with me, at least not in the way they were with her. They had high expectations for her, and she was overwhelmed with wanting to please them. If that doesn't mean she's the beloved daughter, I don't know what is. She ran away anyway and started a new life away from them. And it wasn't until recently, after years of therapy, that she felt like she was coming back, or at least that's what she said. Still, I don't understand why she had to stay away from me so far, or why she had to do everything at my wedding. She could have had her family reunion earlier and just been another guest at the wedding. This whole thing about making it special in the middle of my wedding is what bothers me the most, because there were plenty of other days to do it, just not that one. That's why I don't think she's as innocent as she wants to appear. I also think she's manipulated my parents and will likely disappear from their lives again. In any case, that's something I'm not interested in, because I've also decided to kick my parents out of mine. That's all I have to tell them, and I'm sure it will be the last thing. My wedding wasn't just a wedding, but also a turning point in my life. My parents and sister were part of my life before my wedding, and I want to start the next part from scratch, without them being involved.